What's going on? This is Zach Adelstein here with DFS Army, and we're here to bring you a Week 8 main slate for college football DFS. I'm here with Aaron Friedman, the other half of the college football team over here at DFS Army, and we've been having a really good year. Getting into the last month of the season, there's exactly 1 month from today is the last college football game of the regular season, which is it flies by every year. But excited about these last 5 weekends. We get 27 straight days of football starting today, which is awesome. Um, yeah, excited to get this going. How's your week been, Aaron? How are you?
Good. Yeah, just looking forward to another week of college football. There's no huge games. I know game day is at the HBCU, so should be a fun week with no game that will have a ton of ownership.
Yeah, I agree. Going over to these, some of the pricing on this slate is a little bit different. There's no huge value. There's a few guys I really like that are cheap, but nothing that's like crazy mispriced like there has been probably most weeks this year. Um, So yeah, I mean it's going to be an interesting slate, an interesting way people play, and yeah, I'm excited to get this. Next week we start Maction. I love Maction. I love November. We're going to have college football 5 days a week starting next week for the next, until Thanksgiving basically. So yeah, it's exciting. It's going to be a fun month. If you want to get in on it, head on over to dfsarmy.com. Sign up today. They're doing through Halloween, so through this weekend basically a 20% off any of your their NBA season long or our VIP memberships or our light memberships. So head on over there and get that promotion in this week while you can. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started on this slate. 13 games here. Decent morning and afternoon split. Last week there weren't very many morning games, but it's decent this week. Again, no big games jump out. Is that feature premiere, going to go off matchup. So I think it will be a little bit more spread out. Starting here, the first game is Arkansas traveling to Auburn. Arkansas is a 4-point favorite here with a 61.5 point total. Few places to look that I really like here. Um, this is the first game, so it's hard to see it, but there isn't a ton of value on this slate. But one of my favorite values, or probably maybe my favorite value on the slate, is KJ Jefferson. Um, all the quarterbacks as we get going, there's a few that are under, 6,300 and below, 6,500 and below, but most of them are 7K plus on this slate. Most anybody that's even viable to look at. But for some reason, KJ Jefferson is not. He had that game against Alabama where he got hurt. Um, only put up 14 points. Outside of that, he has one game with 23 points. Every other game is over 30 fantasy points this year. Auburn is awful on defense. They are just not a great team all around. He's getting it done on the ground. He's getting it done through the air. Doesn't have a rushing touchdown now in the last 2 games after having one in each of the last 4 games. So there's still upside to go on that 40-point performance. At 6,300, he is great in cash for me, great in all formats. One of my top plays. Um, Going over to running back, we have Raheem Sanders, who is, again, gets that same great matchup with an awful rushing defense. And the last 2 games, Auburn's given up 10 total touchdowns to running backs and average 60 DraftKings points against them by opposing running backs. They're just not a good team against running backs. And then the other place I really like for a mid-price guy, lower, more of a value guy actually for this slate is Tank Bigsby. Arkansas has not had a great defense in themselves. You can kind of tell that by this spread against Auburn, who is not a good football team. And Bigsby last week kind of, got back to where I think he should be at 20 carries, 179 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kind of went off last week against the Ole Miss team. And this Arkansas team is a lot softer than that Ole Miss team. Going over to wide receivers, not much. I don't like to touch either. I don't play the passing game for Auburn. And Arkansas wide receivers is kind of a roulette wheel. No one really to stick with. Lander sometimes will have decent games. Hazelwood just has not done much this year for his price the way he is. But yeah, I mean KJ Jefferson, you don't need a wide receiver with him. He runs enough. And those 2 running backs I love here. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I agree. I think Jefferson and Bigsby, like you could start a lineup there and be pretty happy and then move on to the other games. Those are two very solid values on the slate. Um, yeah, mostly just looking at those two guys.
Yeah. Moving over to Oklahoma, Iowa State. It's really close. Oklahoma's going to Iowa State. They're 1.5 point favorites, and the total is 55.5 here. It's an interesting game. Iowa State has a pretty good defense, but Oklahoma's decent offense and bad defense. So it's kind of the weakness versus weakness and strength versus strength. Dylan Gabriel still too expensive for me here. Just doesn't have that floor, especially against a good defense. And there's some other guys I like in this price range better. Interesting punt play for me is Hunter Deckers. At 30 Draftkings points last week, has had some upside throughout the season, and he gets this defense that's just as bad against opposing quarterbacks. I mean, no one thought they would be, but they are. It's kind of at 5,300. He's a cheapie that can let you pay up a lot of other places, and I think he's definitely in play here. Running back, I'm not going there. Both of these running back rooms are just too jumbled. I always say has a really good run defense, but we thought Brock was the guy, and then Silas has been the guy, and it's everywhere. I'm not going there. Wide receiver, Xavier Hutchinson, he's 8K, 7,900. He is still the top wide receiver in the country right now, getting the most targets. He has huge upside every week. Somehow he dropped that bomb. He would have been at 200 yards and a touchdown against Texas last game out. But probably the worst play in his college career, honestly. Wide open bomb that would have won them the game. But he still put up 28.5 fantasy points. So he's up there, but going down in price from his last 2 times out, he's definitely in play here. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, definitely. My interest is more on the Iowa State side, just because their defense is really elite. So I don't have a ton of interest in the Oklahoma guys, and they're all pretty priced up. Yeah, so at quarterback, I definitely agree with Deckers. I think he's all format viable at that price. And then another target at receiver is Jalen Noel. He's kind of like the number 2 guy there. He had a big game, and his game log's kind of weird because he never kills you, but he's had the 2 big games in week 4 and week 7, but then under 10 points the other 2. So not a cash play, but I mean that's like another 10K with Deckers and him. You have a stack for 10K. So I always like things like that.
Yeah, I like that for sure. One thing I didn't say about Deckers in that last game, threw it 36 times. I mean, if you look at these, it's hard to think of Iowa State. We think of them as Brees Hall. They're going to run it down your throat, just continually run it. They're throwing a ton this year. At least 36 passes in every game after that week 1, FCS game. And this is a game that I think this could play to the over. 55.5. If they're going to shoot out, if both of these offenses kind of get going a little bit, I think Iowa State's defense is going to control the pace of this game. So if Oklahoma can get scoring, Iowa State can keep up with them. Going over to one of my favorite games to target on this slate, TCU is traveling to West Virginia. They're favored by 7.5 with a 69-point total. Huge total on this game. West Virginia, because it's in West Virginia, I think they get a little bit more of a home. They're up in the mountains. It's just one of the things that Vegas does. And you see weird things happen there. They have 3 wins on the season, but they had that shootout where they really went off. They can put up some points too. They can put up some yards for sure. JT Daniels, that being said, don't love him, but I do think this is a nice spot for Duggan again. I think he's in play every week. West Virginia has given up over 300 passing yards in 3 straight games. And Duggan, that's one thing, he hasn't. He has 2 games, but 2 in the last 4 or 2 in the last 5 over 300 yards. But this is a place I think he really can go off. Didn't have a rushing touchdown last week, but had 4 in the 3 weeks before that. And just one of those high price guys that I think is worth it if you want to go there. Going over to running back, Andre Miller's getting closer to where he should be valued, but this West Virginia run team is not great, and Miller is getting a ton of volume. 51 carries in the last 2 weeks. They've, like I said, West Virginia's given up some big games to opposing running backs. Even with those 29 carries, had 150 yards, 3 yards, 2 touchdowns. Still getting involved in the passing game. Nice floor, especially over the game the last 5 weeks. Had that little bit of a struggling game against Kansas because it was they got away from the run game a little bit. But I mean, great game log. He should not be 6,300. He's not what I think he should be priced. Donaldson was back. He didn't look as good as he has in the past. We still do know he has that huge upside to him. So he is a GPP play for me. GPP only. He's kind of a price guy at the wide receiver tier this week. Going over to wide receiver, Johnson's the main guy I want to target for TCU. Outside of that, they kind of rotate in guys who's going to get it. But Johnson really is looking like the guy that we thought. Came back to earth a little bit last week, but even there had 474 yards in the touchdown. Has big upside, and this West Virginia two opposing wide receivers. For the other side, for West Virginia, 2 guys that really get involved are Ford Wheaton and Prather. That being said, they're basically the same guy. Ford Wheaton had some big games the first couple weeks, and Jack. A huge game, but as a whole over the last 4 weeks, it is better than Fort Wheaton, and you didn't have 30. And never corrected it. So here's my main target for West Virginia. Probably all of them, then a few pieces of Fort Wheaton. This is a game I really want to target and get a big chunk of with that total. What are you looking at?
Yeah, the quarterbacks are priced pretty interesting. Duggan's like close to his ceiling, but I get it. Running back is interesting with Mathis out. Maybe we get a little more Johnson there, but probably not a main lineup play. And then receiver, I like Johnson a lot too. He's shown a lot of consistency. He has touchdowns in each of his last 3 games. And then Jared Wiley for TCU is an interesting punt. He's he has double-digit scoring in each of his last 3 games, and so and Prather. The Prather price is really fair. I think Prather can be a main lineup guy consideration.
Yeah, for sure. He's nice. Again, there's not a ton of value on this slate, so I think it's going to be more, if you're making a main lineup, cash lineup, it's going to be a more balanced approach. So those mid-price guys, you definitely need to get in there. Going over to Georgia Tech at Florida State. Florida State's favored by 23 here with a 48-point total. Georgia Tech, just the ITT is too low. I'm not touching them. The only 2 places I really think I'm going to go here, I have a few pieces of Trey Benson, and I really like Toafili better. Had more volume the past 2 weeks. He has double-digit touches now in each of the last 2 weeks. Has a touchdown. Georgia Tech's decent against the run, not great, not absolutely terrible, but again, he's a value play. Toafili. I'd rather take that extra 700 savings for, I think, similar upside or even more upside with Toafili. That's really, in this game, the only place I can really go. It's hard to pinpoint every week who's going to get the volume for Florida State in the passing game. And, I like Jordan Travis, but I don't like this price. What are you thinking?
Yeah, so this game is really interesting because if Sims doesn't go, Gibson is really bad, and the game can get out of hand really quickly. So I do like the Toafili call and sprinkling in some of the running backs in GPPs for Florida State, just because I think this this game this one has like blowout written all over it to me.
Yeah, I mean, last week Toafili, I think, had 11 carries, and their main runner has been Jordan Travis. Had 14 carries last week, but I don't think they run him as much this week. If it's a blowout, they don't want to get him hurt, so there's no reason to have those design quarterback runs. Going over to Notre Dame and Syracuse, it's actually an interesting game to me. It's got a lower total. Notre Dame's headed to Syracuse with Syracuse 3-point favorite here with a 47-point total. It's interesting to me because of the pricing more than anything. Garrett Schrader sitting here at 5,900. Talking about him a little bit last week. He's consistently getting you 3 to 4 times value, which is literally, if you're going to go 4 times value for every player, you're getting 240 fantasy points. You're cashing all of your cash lineups, and you're getting great value in GPPs. And that's what we ask for, is at least 4 times value. So 5,900, he might not put up 30 or 35 points, but if he's putting up, 25, he gets an extra 10 yards rushing. Some of these weeks puts up 25 points under 6K. So really nice play for you. So I definitely think he's in play every week that they keep him down here. Just the way that he's running the ball so much and getting volume. Moving over to running back. Tucker, I think, is a decent play too. I saw a stat the other day. He's involved in 51% of Syracuse's plays between his targets and his runs now. So he's just getting a ton of just options throughout the year. Now that's, obviously didn't have a ton of runs last week, but I think that's going to happen most weeks against Clemson, and he still made value. I mean, or had a decent value. He didn't make a ton of value, but over 2x last week in a bad situation. The Notre Dame situation is interesting to me because it is a 3-headed backfield, but they really wanted to get Diggs involved, and they did. And they gave him 28 carries last week. Had 130 yards, didn't get in the end zone. I think part of that was they wanted to get the younger guy involved in a blowout. But if he's going to get, 18 to 20 carries, he had nice, yards per carry. Syracuse isn't that great against the run. And at 3,900, I think he's a nice value play. The only place I really look in 2 places on this, these wide receivers, which is interesting. It tells you a lot about the schools. The 2 tight ends. Gadsden continues to be very good. First place they look, he's doing pretty well. He's getting priced up there now, but I still think he's in play in this matchup. And then I'm going back to the well. Do it every week. Going to do it again next week, probably. So they price him appropriately. Michael Mayer is in play every week. Last week it was 5K, had 26 points. He hasn't been above 6K this year. If he's going to get me, basically every week he has a floor of 20. He has some duds in there, definitely. But even those duds, I mean, that Stanford game, they targeted him 10 times. So it's not like he's not getting the opportunity. They're just not getting it to him. So if he's up to 6K, he's going to be one of the main features in my lineups, and I think he should in most lineups in this format. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. Schrader is all format worthy at price, and then Diggs is an interesting value. And at receiver, mostly Mayer for me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why they refuse to price him up, but I'm going to take advantage of it. Going over to another interesting game, this Ohio State, Penn State. First of all, I think this is probably the best football game of the day. Just pure football game. Total here is 61.5, with Ohio State going to Penn State and being favored by 15.5. First of all, starting with Penn State, I do think there are a few scenarios where some of their pieces do pretty well. This could end up as a shootout. We know this matchup the past several years for sure has been very close, and Penn State has been leading a lot of them going into the fourth quarter, comebacks. So there is a scenario where their pieces do well. That being said, I don't like this price for Sean Clifford, not when I can go to Schrader for $1,100 less. I don't love, Singleton, maybe a few pieces of in GPPs just because I like his talent, but that's a talent play. I do think that this defense, after playing, 7 or 8 games in the null system has really improved for Ohio State, and their linebacker core especially has gotten very good. And then I don't touch, the way they're throwing the ball. I don't really like to get involved with the Penn State receiving core. But now going to where I will play, some of the Ohio State guys, to me, they're all just GPP options just because of the matchup. And I do think this could play to the under. And it's getting spread out. Even last week, they put up a decent amount of points last week. Their defense did it, though. It wasn't their offense that was doing it. Their offense didn't do great last week. Let's see if we can get this. There we go. So you got CJ Stroud last week, 24 points. It's fine for most guys, but at 9K, it's not going to cut it. But again, he has a ceiling. We know he can go off. So I do think he's a GPP play. And then the receivers, the places I really want to target the most, Harrison and Egbuka. Till Jackson Smith and Jigba looked like he got banged up again last week. They said he wasn't. He was just on the pitch count. Believe what you want. He had 3 targets. Until he does anything, I'm not going to go there. And Fleming only had 2 catches himself. So those are both places I'm really not going to go. The only 2 places I really want to go are Harrison and Egbuka. And I do think that this is a good Penn State defense. And at their prices and with the way they're going to be owned, I think, on this slate, because there aren't any huge offenses, I think they're going to have to really go off. And I don't, know how much confidence I have in 30-plus fantasy points for them. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. Mostly a game I want to watch, but tough matchup for the receivers with Joey Porter Jr., a lockdown cornerback for Penn State. And they have a really nice defense. This should be a good test, but other than having Harrison Jr. and Egbuka in your pool, I'm not seeing a lot here.
Yeah, I mean, the pricing, we will get back to Ohio State. They have some softer matchups coming up, but they're in a tough part of their schedule right now. And it's one of those things where you don't have to chase them. There's no reason to. Going on to Rutgers at Minnesota. This is a Big Ten matchup if there is one. Rutgers going to Minnesota, who is favored by 14.5 points, 41-point total, which I might have to just nail that under. This just has like 27 points written all over it. That being said, the only way this is going to go to the over is if Mo Ibrahim has like 2 to 3 touchdowns himself. He is finally at a point where I am happy to play him. It's been a while. But for some reason, they kept him up there. He wasn't doing it. And he's finally come down. If he gets you 19 to 22 points now, he's not going to kill you. Whereas when he was 9,600, if he got you 19 to 22 points, he was going to kill you. So I do think he's definitely in play here. There's not a ton of value, so it's hard to get to him. But Rutgers has a decent run defense, but they haven't played anyone like him. And if he's going to get 30 carries against Rutgers, I am going to put him in every lineup. I don't think he will, but I do think that he is a nice play here, a decent play for sure. What are you thinking, Aaron?
Yeah, it's an interesting price. I think I like Chase Brown, who we'll talk about a little better in the same range. But I definitely agree with everything you said about he's getting in this price range. He's a very fair play.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for him is he's not getting the touchdowns he was getting, 2 years ago before he got hurt last year. We were seeing a lot more, these beginning of the year numbers for him the past couple of years where he'd go, 22 for 120 and 2 touchdowns. Whereas now in the past 3 weeks, he's only gotten 1 touchdown. If he falls in the end zone one more time, you get close to 30. That's really nice at 7,300. So, I mean, that's what you're really hoping for is 2 touchdowns for him. Because, I mean, you're going to get 100 yards. He has 100 yards in every game. That's just what he does. So you really need those 2 touchdowns for him to really smash that value. Moving on, Florida, Georgia. Game I did not think would be, I didn't think Vegas would look like this at the beginning of the year. Florida's, this game is in Jacksonville, so it's a neutral site. Georgia's favored by 22.5 with a 57-point total. Some interesting things here. Stetson Bennett, after having a really big start of the year, has come back to who he is. There's no reason to play him. Anthony Richardson is a decent price, but this is an awful spot for him. So, not touching him really. If for somehow you think that Florida's going to stay in this game, then you can definitely go with Richardson. I mean, we know his upside, but we've also seen his downside recently. So, that's kind of where I'm at there. Even with Milton out last week, they still spread out the run game like crazy. So I'm just not going to either of these run games. And at receiver, Bowers is always in play, but he's not really had, he's had some good weeks. He has not had good weeks recently. There's no reason to play him here. But he's a GPP play if you want to. He's fine in GPPs. You can go however you want. But yeah, Georgia is a fantastic football team. They're just not a good fantasy football team. What are you looking at, Aaron?
Yeah, my favorite play is Edwards at running back. What's his name? Yeah, Edwards. He's got in the end zone in each of their last 3 games. So I like him in your cheap running back pool. But yeah, it's not an exciting game.
No, I don't hate that Edwards call at all. Yeah, it'll be a fun half of football to watch. I don't know if it'll be a fun full game to watch. I think it could be a blowout quick. But yeah, it's always one of the fun games of the year to watch. All right, moving on. Oregon's traveling to Cal. Oregon's 17.5-point favorites with a 58.5-point total. Bo Nix's the most expensive quarterback on this slate. Talked about him last week. He's earned it. Never thought I would say that, especially last year or the year before. But here we are. Fantastic floor, great ceiling. I don't even look at that week 1 anymore. Since then he has just been a great all-around player. I don't know if you can get there in cash. I don't mind it in cash though if you want to, if you can. Obviously, good GPP play. Cal does not have a great defense. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at there. Over at running back, if they're going to continue to give Bucky Irving volume, I think he's a nice play. We don't know that they will. Maybe that was just a thing last week. But if he's going to get that volume, I think he's a decent play in all formats. And I think he's a decent GPP play regardless. Over wide receiver, I wish, same thing. If he's going to get this volume, I think he's fine at this price. But with his volume every other week, I don't love this price. He is a big touchdown scorer. So, GPPs for sure. I would stack him probably with Knicks just because of his price. And they're both expensive. So a lot of people probably will not be playing them together. So you're going to hope for Franklin to go off and to benefit from both of them getting those touchdowns, and maybe Knicks not getting, getting a few rushing touchdowns, but really hammering Franklin. There are a few plays I like on this Cal team. Sturdivant has 25 targets over the last 2 weeks. It's been in the end zone, 5 times in the last 5 weeks, 4 of those 5 games. Getting peppered. This is another great spot for him, and he's got a decent floor. So he is a guy I like with a good game script. Hunter's had some big games. Fell off last week, but before that was really doing well as well. He's more of a big play guy. And Oregon has some big plays they give up at times. So he's a guy that'll be in my pool as well, in my GPP pool. What do you like here, Aaron?
Yeah, I like Knicks a good amount here. I think I've talked about this a bunch, but some of the pricing is like the Mayor, for example, should be like 2K more. Some of the pricing on guys is just arbitrary, and you can afford to spend up and spend down in the places you want to. I'm looking for a note I had on Sturdivant. Yeah, I like Sturdivant a good amount. He's getting, you mentioned like the 25 targets in the last couple of games. Yeah, he's a nice play here. Don't mind him at all if you're building a mid-range cash lineup or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you worry about him again in bigger games, but in that Notre Dame game at Notre Dame, he came through with 16 fantasy points, and that's you know I would like more. I'd like closer to 25 for a GPP, but 16 fantasy points is not going to kill you at all.
Yeah.
Going over to Oklahoma State at Kansas State. This game I'm actually really interested in for a lot of reasons. Some football, some fantasy. This is a game we really need to watch news. I've heard all kinds of reports of what happened to Adrian Martinez, whether he was really hurt, whether he pulled himself out, whether the medical staff wouldn't let him back in, whether he refused to go in. So I just kind of want to see what they're going to do there. I don't know. It's either a game time decision, so just have to watch that. If he's out, I like Will Howard. Will Howard looked very good last week. He looked good last year. He's going to use his legs. He can run. He can throw the ball. He actually, I think, looked just as accurate as Adrian Martinez has. And he did very well against the TCU defense. And I don't think this Oklahoma State defense is much better than that TCU defense. And they could be, I think they're very on par. If Adrian Martinez is in, he's fine. But I think both of these quarterbacks have very similar range of outcomes, and I'd rather pay $2,000 cheaper for it personally. Spencer Sanders, I still think he's injured. He has toughing it out. He's putting up a nice floor. I think this is another place that he can be just fine. There's other places, other quarterbacks I like better in that price range, especially with this total. But this is a game that's expected to shoot out, so I don't hate this at all. Going over to running back, with Adrian Martinez out, I like Deuce Vaughn a lot more than with him in. He got his touchdown because Adrian Martinez wasn't there. He was used a lot last week. I wish they were getting him a little bit more involved at times. Only had 12 carries last week. It was more the nature of the game than anything. This defense, this Oklahoma State run defense, is atrocious. They're just awful. They give up big plays. They'll hold up a guy for a play, and then the next play he'll run for 30 yards. And then they'll stuff him for 2 plays, and then he's going to run for 20 yards. So it can be frustrating watching if you're not consistently watching from a fantasy aspect. But, they give up a lot of big plays. Over at running back, it's interesting. Richardson exited last week with an injury after getting 3 short touchdowns. One of the oddest stat lines you'll see for fantasy. He had 13 carries for 24 yards and 3 touchdowns. Had another 4 receptions. So on 24 rushing yards, he got 25 fantasy points. But that's the way it goes. With him out, Jaden Nixon looked really good. Doesn't show up on the average, but had 8 carries for 64 yards and 3 receptions. He's a quick guy. He's a fast guy. He can make explosive plays. The other guy that'll get some carries, Ollie Gordon. He did not get as many last week. Jaden Nixon's the guy for me if Richardson is out. Going over to wide receiver. One thing, I'm a Texas fan, if you didn't know, one thing they talked about all game that the Oklahoma State coaches preached to the media is they want to get Bryson Green more involved. He had a big game, and then it's not on paper here, but he had 0 receptions on 3 targets in between his Texas Tech and Texas game. And all they talked about was they wanted to get him involved. And he had 9 targets, 5 receptions for 133 yards and a touchdown. Got him involved in the run game. Didn't go well, but got him involved. They want to get the ball in this guy's hands. And this is an offense I like to get big receivers in. So Bryson Green is a guy at that price that I really, really like. Other guys that had big games last week, I think Brennan Presley had like 12 targets. John Paul Richardson had a ton of targets. So these are both guys that are in play. Richardson was out last week. We need to see if he's coming back. But both of those guys had a ton of targets. For Kansas State, Brooks is decent. Knowles is fine. Neither of them went off last week, but both. Brooks has been the top receiver on the year. I like them, honestly, a little bit better if Will Howard's in because he doesn't run as well as Adrian Martinez, so I do think they throw it a little bit more. But they're both in play if you want, kind of more for game stacks than anything else. But yeah, my main targets here, depending on who's the quarterback for Kansas State, I really like going Will Howard if he's in. Going over to running back, if he's in, I like Vaughn a lot. If Richardson's out, I like Nixon for the salary savings. And then at wide receiver, Green. Just a great mid-price guy. Maybe some sprinklings of the other guys. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I like Sanders even with the injury, he's just been
Yeah, he's been good.
good. But yes, same thing with Will Howard. It's gonna be tough with pivots, but if we get word that Martinez is out, then he's definitely a strong play in his own right. Um, yeah, I like Vaughn a lot, and then I agree with you on Green.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Going over to Wake Forest at Louisville. Another really interesting matchup, an interesting quarterback matchup here. Wake Forest going to Louisville. Wake's favored by 4.5 with a 62.5 point total. Another game is supposed to shoot out. These are the games we really want to target. Hartman and Cunningham, they're both decently expensive, but I think both of them are solidly in play here. Hartman kind of came back last week, really came back last week, had 43 points. We kind of thought he was going to do that against a bad defense. I think this is another game where he could go off, but I think this is a game where the other team can keep up. And it's something I really want to watch. Going down to Malik Cunningham, he's running it decent amount, threw it a little bit less last week with a nice win against Pitt. Didn't need to do a ton. But when he does, those close games, look at that Boston College game they lost. He ran it 15 times. He got in the end zone 3 times. In order for Malik Cunningham to really get value, he needs to get rushing touchdowns. Last week, without any rushing touchdowns, he still got 20 fantasy points, which tells me a lot. Because if he gets one rushing touchdown there, 26, he gets 2, which is obviously looking, you look at his numbers, he's very capable of. You're sitting at 32 points. You're sitting pretty. So he's a guy, he's more GPP for me at this price, though, because you do need those rushing touchdowns. I'm not touching any of these run games personally. I don't like. And Wake Forest has too much there now with everybody back. And Louisville, I'd rather have my running back in the quarterback. Then going over to wide receiver. For Louisville, Hudson's the top guy. Had 5 receptions last week. I don't love this price. He just doesn't have as much of a ceiling as I like for it. For Wake Forest, the wide receivers are really interesting. Perry didn't have as much volume last week, so between Banks and Green, they had 19 targets. They both had nice games last week. Banks had 26 fantasy points, almost 27 with 7 receptions and 2 touchdowns. Green went off for at a much lower price. He only had 11, but he had, I believe, 9 targets, which I actually don't mind here for a stat play because you're getting that salary savings. Perry still has huge upside. We know his upside, but he's also had more of a floor lately. So at this price, you do have to factor that in. He's more GPP. I am just fine playing Sam Hartman naked. He throws it enough that he's going to get you that volume, even though he doesn't run it a ton. So, my main plays here are the 2 quarterbacks, but I do think you can sprinkle in some of those wide receivers. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. I like trying to think when Mitchell comes back for Louisville, but or not Mitchell. Who am I thinking? Evans.
He's questionable this week, last I saw. He's day-to-day ahead of the game.
Yeah, the running backs are kind of messy here on both sides. And then I like Banks a lot. I think he's going to have a huge year next year after Perry graduates.
Yeah, I agree. And Perry's just gotten kind of muddled. He hadn't done it this year. He just hadn't gotten to get going. Moving on to Illinois at Nebraska. It's another really interesting game. Illinois is traveling to Nebraska. They're favored by 7.5 with a 50.5 point total. I don't touch either of these quarterbacks. Going over to running back, Chase Brown, 41 carries last week, 31 the week before, 25 the week before. He's getting involved in the pass game. He doesn't have a rushing touchdown in the last 2 weeks, which is amazing to me that he has 72 carries and not a touchdown. Like there's got to be something statistical about that. That's a huge anomaly. And he only has 4 rushing touchdowns on the year, which is amazing considering the amount of carries he has. But this Nebraska run defense is not good, and he's going to get a ton of volume. Going over, I don't like playing against the Illinois run defense. They have a very good run defense. Over on the other side, Trey Palmer is in play. He's expensive, but I don't see how he doesn't get peppered here. Had a few less targets last week, or even with that, you can see had 237 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. He went off, and had a carry for 60 yards. So I mean, he is their main offense. They want to get in the ball as much as they can. And even at 7,600, I think he's going to be very low owned because of his price and because he plays for Nebraska. And we saw last week he can get you 50 points. He's got a ceiling. This isn't Purdue, so they do have a good defense. But I could see, that entire receiver core getting 45 fantasy points and Trey Palmer getting 37 of it. That's just kind of how they funnel their team. The other play that's kind of interesting to me here in this format is Isaiah Williams. He hasn't been getting as much volume as of late, but he was getting 12 to 15 targets a game for a little while there. Had 9 receptions last week for 62 yards, 5,800 if he can get that into the end zone. If he gets you 10 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown, that's 23 fantasy points. So he's just a GVP piece that I would want here, kind of in lineups that I don't have any Chase Brown. I do think Chase Brown is going to be very highly owned here. So kind of just a pivot off of that. But besides that, that's kind of the only things I like here. Chase Brown a ton, and these 2 receivers a little bit. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. I like Chase Brown is someone I want in cash in all formats. If the game gets away, Josh McCray may be a punt in like GPPs. But I mean, there's other cheap running backs too. Then at wide receiver, I think Palmer's all format viable. So he's actually leading. I just had this stat up. He's leading FBS in yardage in conference games only. So in the 4 Big Ten games, he's averaging 131 yards per game, and he has 4 touchdowns in the 4 games. So yeah, I think people don't want to pay up for him, but he's another, if he was on a different team, like people would have no problem paying for him. So
for me, his price is very similar to Xavier Hutchinson, and no one has a problem paying for Xavier Hutchinson.
Yeah,
they don't have the best offense, but because it's Nebraska and how they played this year, I think people look down on him.
Yeah, I like the Nebraska. I like their roster. And I mean, Joseph's doing a decent job there. Thompson isn't great for fantasy, but Grant's a solid back. Palmer's good. They do have some interesting pieces. But yeah, probably just those few select pieces that we talked about with this game.
Yeah, they're not a ton for fantasy there. Moving on to the last game on the slate. We have Cincy traveling to UCF. UCF is favored by a point with a 55.5 point total. This game's kind of going back and forth a little bit this week. It's a really interesting game to me. Everyone went all in on Plumlee last week on one of those short night slates, and he dudded, which happens. But his stat line, if you look at it, to me, it's first of all, it's very hard to go into Greenville, North Carolina, and play. ECU has a very hard place to play, and it's something that they do. He had 3 interceptions all year before that game, and had 3 interceptions in that game. Had a fumble. Just had an awful game. I think because of that, a lot of people are going to be off of him. So I think he is a fantastic GPP piece. That being said, he is playing Cincinnati, who does have a good defense. So, I do think there is risk in playing him, but he's one of those guys that can give you 40 points in the blink of an eye. He can go for a 57-yard rushing touchdown and throw for 350 yards, and no one will think twice of it. So he's one of those guys that is in play for me for sure. I don't love Ben Bryant, especially not at this price. I think he's a decent quarterback, but they just price him too high for what he does. And, he has one game over 30 points this year. It's just too expensive for me. Going over to running back. Isaiah, I don't know what either. I don't know what UCF is doing here. Like they have these running backs and they don't use them the way they should. I do think Bowser is interesting with his touchdown upside, but his price. There's so many other running backs right there that I would much rather play than him. Um, and then going down to these Cincy running backs, McClelland, I thought it would be closer to 60-40. I think he outcarried Kiner. What was it? It was 16-13, so it was a little bit closer than that. But McClellan had the much better game. 16 for 129 and a touchdown. He's a very good running back. And UCF has a decent run defense, but I think McClellan just does have nice upside here. I do think Kiner's a GPP play if you want to go there. He had 13 for 43, didn't do much with it. The week before, had a big game against Tulsa. He does have some upside. He's a good running back. He's young. The freshman there, he's a highly recruited freshman. But yeah, if I'm, in most of my rosters, I'm going to have McClellan there. And then going over to wide receiver, the other place I kind of want to look. O'Keefe has been very boomer bust this year.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, it's one of those. This is a tough matchup too. I don't love this price. Kobe Hudson every week has improved. He's only been in, last 3 weeks he's been out there, gotten healthy. I say improved as far as targets goes. He's gotten more and more every week. Had that big game against Temple with 2 touchdowns. No, he's decent. I don't love the price either, but he's one of those guys that I could see having a piece of in this game. Tyler Scott had a walking boot on last week. We don't think he's going to play. If he is in, I think he's always in play. It's just the way they use him. If he's out, Trey Tucker becomes a play. He got hurt last week, had 1 reception, and was out. If they're both out, the 2 places I kind of want to go to. Wiley had like 7 or 8 targets last week, had a decent target game, not necessarily decent for production. Nick Mardner had a ton of targets last week. I think he had 8 or 9 targets as well. So those are 2 places I will look in this game just to get some cheaper wide receiver production on a slate that doesn't have a lot of it. And then, Javon Baker, he's had some big games. He has been very boomer bust himself, very, very boomer bust himself. So he's not somebody I'm going to chase at this price either. But yeah, that's where I'm at here. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, it's a really tough game for fantasy. A lot of moving parts and pieces here. Yeah, I loved Plumlee last week, but he definitely let the environment get to him. So he could have a good bounce back here. I don't mind running him naked and yeah, McClellan too, but not a ton I love here.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. There are pieces that could win you a GPP here, but it's one of those that I don't know if anybody will have them on their roster because it's very hard to pick out what's going to happen here. But yeah, that's the last game on this DraftKings slate. What do you have over at FanDuel, Aaron? Any top plays you like?
Yeah, let me open up my FanDuel window. Yeah, so real quick while I open it up, for tonight's slate, I think Jack Chambers will split time. So initially I liked him, but now I'm gonna come off of him, and I'll update that in our notes. And that's one of the benefits about subscribing is you get all of our, late game notes that we post on the fly. You get to talk to us in the Discord. So definitely a good reason to join. Yeah, so the FanDuel slate, a lot of the same games, the night games are not super attractive this week outside of Kentucky, Tennessee. in terms of fantasy. I mean, Michigan State's like a fun rivalry game, but not amazing fantasy wise. Yeah, a lot of the same plays. Like Deckers is pretty cheap relative to the position over there. Richardson's really cheap. He's 7,200 on FanDuel, so that's I don't mind taking a shot on him and hoping he has a ceiling game. At running back, Vaughn's still cheap. He's 9K, which like anything under 10K, I'm pretty comfortable playing him. Bigsby is 7,400 on FanDuel, which is a good price. And then Edwards, who we talked about. Let me see Diggs' price. Yeah, Diggs is super cheap on FanDuel too. He's 5,400, so he might be one of the better value plays on both sites. And then at receiver, same group, good mid range. So Prather's 7,200. Blinking on. Yeah, not a ton of value. Maybe a Brew McCoy if you think Tillman coming back eats into. And then Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed is a good play for the DraftKings night slate and FanDuel. He has touchdowns in his last 3 games. So at his price, he's gonna be like an all format play because last year he was in the high 7s or high 8s. So I like Jaden Reed a lot. And then other guys we talked about like Wiley are cheap. And then even though Texas A&M's awful, guys like Muhammad and Stewart are really cheap and on the main slate there.
Very nice. Well, yeah, head on over to dfsarmy.com. All of our cheat sheets are going up tonight, maybe a few of the later slates tomorrow. But you can join us in Discord. We'll be there all day today, all day tomorrow. A lot of the next couple of weeks with all of this action going on, updating you on the latest news, trying to dig in where these beat writers are not very good in the action slates, where you have to kind of guess what's going on. But yeah, it's the most exciting time of year for college football.
Definitely start lightly with action.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this year you don't get a ton of it. Like, it feels like in the years before, there's been a few more weeks of it. This year you get 3 weeks, so you got to take what you can get. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like NBA used to be. You find out 10 minutes after the lock that half of their team is suspended and didn't make the trip. So yeah, head on over again to dfsarmy.com. Join us. We have those promo codes all over, and we would love to see you there. Good luck this week, and have fun watching football.